And so it was a pneumatic sensor instead of the, at the time, piezo belts or rip belt. But the key thing here is that at the end of the study, you plug the thing into a charger and it would wirelessly transmit the data so that you had immediate access to your data. Think about that and the efficiency of healthcare. This was one of the big things that changed things. So how does that lead into some of our current trends? Current trends, we have some of these sorts of devices. Anybody use these? The watch pats, or the similar type of peripheral artery tonometry. This was the first watch pat that I used. This is their disposable unit now. And then this is the competitor that ResMed just bought, the Night Owl. So we have peripheral artery tonometry, so disposable devices that can be downloaded to an app so that you still have immediate access to health care. Now, I still wonder on the long term when we're all so environmentally conscious about all these disposable devices that we're coming up with, but you see a trend to that, particularly during COVID, that we move to more and more disposable devices. So I wonder about that being part of the future. We still have our other common devices. Respironics has the Alice Night 1, which is more of a conventional, uses a single rip belt, uses a nasal pressure cannula. ResMed still has the Apnea Link. I understand that that's being discontinued, but I'm not positive about that. Dave can probably tell you more about that than I can. And that it's going more toward the Night Owl. I'm not sure about that. And then this is the device that my company makes, the Knox T3. These are all conventional types of HST devices as far as the channels that they measure. Now, the very near future and even part of the current with this is here. So the greatest growth for sleep technology is in home sleep technology, virtual care, and telehealth. While there's stability and growth reported by the majority of respondents, nearly 1/5 of respondents reported decreasing in-lab studies. By the way, this is from the surveys that the AAST did, and then part of what was published by Sleep Review magazine. There's a decline in testing volume overall, and a financial outlook were significant drivers of negative sentiment regarding the outlook for sleep centers. So there's still that negative outlook for sleep centers themselves, which I'll talk about later. And there has been a sharp decline of in-lab testing due to the pandemic. And most respondents believe in-lab testing will not return to pre-pandemic numbers. How many labs have already started to return to pre-pandemic numbers? I see a lot that already have. So some of these things that we saw as fears and worries, we've already seen sporadically that it's not particularly true. But here's the summary statement. HSAT, AI, or automated intelligence, or machine learning, you might call it, and remote PAP titration and management are the future of healthcare delivery. Now, why do you think people would think that? If you look at healthcare in general, isn't that happening everywhere? Is there anything special about the sleep lab when it comes to that happening? So, no, I can tell you this. My daughter, when I had my daughter, we were in the hospital for 3 days. When my daughter had my grandchild, she had an abruption and an emergency C-section, and he was in an ambulance headed for Vanderbilt, and she was discharged same day. I'm like, what? Are you kidding? If we look at all of healthcare, it is being moved out of the hospital and into the home. The very critical patients are still seen in the hospital. And I think that the same thing is going to be true for the sleep center. So if we talk more about this from this survey, where do you believe the outlook is for your sleep center? People said 28% were uncertain. That's troublesome to me. 58% though said strong with a promising future. I like that almost twice as many said that as were unsure. Some said that we're at risk or unstable, and then some had other answers. But as far as where it's going, here were the answers. Pharmaceutical patient therapies, automated scoring technologies, we'll talk about that. Behavioral patient therapies, AI machine learning scoring technologies, and then AI predicting the high probability of sleep disorders. Home sleep therapy equipment, consumer wearables, that's a big area of discussion that I actually decided not to talk much about here because there's just way too much that's uncertain. Virtual care or telehealth, and then home sleep testing and portable sleep testing. So you see this virtual care, telehealth, and home sleep testing. What did COVID do to us? I think it absolutely accelerated that curve right there so that we have a lot more of that than we would have at this point if it were not for COVID. So highlights with that, increases in virtual care. The top-cited challenges from this survey anticipated in the next 3 to 5 years were home sleep testing challenging the lab, consumable wearables challenging the lab. And it is a concern. I can tell you that, different companies that release these things, Amazon, Google, Apple, they are doing sleep testing. Matter of fact, in my work, I work with some of the researchers from those companies. They are using different PSG devices to validate their algorithms. They're working hard on this. And many of them already have at least a DME license, and others a full medical license so that they can distribute these devices as medical devices should they decide to take them through the FDA, which is the key thing, should they ever decide to take them through the FDA. These companies are prepared. Will they do it? We don't know. So that's why I decided to leave most of that out, but just comment about it briefly. And then automated scoring technologies and machine learning types of scoring technologies, and those two were kind of combined. So in that increase in virtual care, there was an opposite question that was asked, what are the greatest challenges or trends you think to anticipate in the next 5 years? And again, those were the top ones. Automated scoring technologies, consumable wearables, and home sleep testing and portable sleep testing. However, even though sleep testing is shifting to the home, in-lab studies have been delayed due to staffing issues as well. So while this is clearing out the beds, the problem hasn't been that the beds are clear. The problem has been that the beds can't be staffed. How many have seen that issue around? I see a lot of hands. You can't find techs. And everywhere I go, they go, do you know any techs? Do you know any techs who might want to move? And they're looking for that. So while we're working on expanding our reach, we need to ensure our ability to do so that we can still work with that high acuity patient in the lab as we are starting to reach out more for other things. If we don't fill that tech shortage, this is going to further drive testing to the home. And if you are worried about the lab, then that's going to be an issue because we need good sleep techs in the lab and we need good sleep techs to handle these higher acuity patients that will be in the lab when the simple patients, if you will, are going to the home. All right, so, and also this conversation must include addressing current needs plus future roles. What are the future roles? You see a lot of talk about the CCSH credential. And I have that credential. I was actually working in a clinical role for a manufacturer at the time I got the credential, and it did absolutely nothing to help me in my role. But I wanted that credential because I saw a future there, and I've already used that. I left that company and went to work for the Wellstar Group in Atlanta and worked as their sleep navigator for a while and helped develop their sleep navigator program. And there's going to be a lot of work that can be done around that. If you look in hospital systems, you see navigators all over the place for whatever, diabetes navigators, respiratory navigators, cardiac navigators, all these navigators, because if you looked at that, at the time it was a 20 hospital system. They've kind of shrunk down a little bit now, or a 20 facility system, I should say. 20 facilities. Guess what avenue they had to evaluate any patient being admitted to the hospital, whether it was admission or whether it was for outpatient surgery, any patient to be evaluated for obstructive sleep apnea. None. Absolutely none. Even though stop bang is built in to their EMR system. They weren't using it. They didn't turn it on. And so what we ended up doing was turning that on house-wide. And if you ever listen to Massey Arrington, he speaks about the success of that program quite a bit. And it was a very successful program. I didn't stay there very long. Knox came calling, and I missed the teaching that I got to do when I was in that kind of a role. But was very proud to be part of the development of that program, because now they're going great guns. They've got 52 beds of sleep that are full, and they still do 300 home sleep tests a month. It's a massive sleep program because they keep their beds clear and efficient by using home sleep testing to screen and evaluate the patients who are simpler, and keep the beds open, because doing 300 home studies, you figure maybe a quarter of those patients are complicated, and those are the patients that go into the 52 beds of sleep that are spread out all over Atlanta. And so it is a massive sleep program that is fed by home sleep testing, not killed by home sleep testing. So an honest discussion including near and far-term goals is essential to this whole thing. So here's the big thing that came out from home sleep testing. Remember that initial comment, we need sleep data. You know, these home test devices don't give you sleep data. Well, now they do. If you look at this particular paper, if you know this guy here, Edmund Shaw, he is the product manager for Philips Healthcare. And so if you look at the Alice Night 1, and you pay for their analysis system called Somnalyzer, it uses cardiorespiratory signals to estimate sleep stages. And you can get sleep stages if you purchase their advanced scoring analysis. Now, their basic scoring analysis does not give you that. It's still an average frequency value kind of old-fashioned scoring analysis. If you look at Knox Medical, we have a technology that is currently in FDA. It's available worldwide other than the US, thanks to FDA. But it estimates sleep states from respiration and body movements. 91.6% accurate in our testing. It's extremely accurate. How does it work? We have calibrated RIP. So the RIP is calibrated epic by epic every 30 seconds. And so as the patient breathes, we can estimate the contribution of the chest versus the abdomen. What happens in REM sleep? Accessory muscles stop, and the diaphragm's running the show. What happens in non-REM sleep? Accessory muscles help, and we can see the contribution of that. And there's actually 52 different parameters that we're deriving, 50 of them from the RIP belts and a couple from the pulse ox and all of that. Very accurately estimate sleep state based on cardiorespiratory signals, same thing that you see Philips doing. If you look at ENSO data, they have ENSO TST that can be interfaced with most any sleep system, and they actually have a table out here. I encourage you to visit them, a good company. The interesting thing about ENSO is they don't have a product. If you look at Philips and Knox, they take their technology and apply it specifically to their product. ENSO doesn't have a product. They can apply it to multiple platforms. So they have partnered with Cadwell, and Cadwell builds some of that into their systems now so that you can have AI-based automatic scoring. And then other people have integrated into their systems and all, but it primarily uses the pulse ox sensor. And if you look at their scoring or their reliability studies, I believe it's somewhere around 88% accurate, which is pretty good. If you look at inter-score reliability across the board, that's one of the things. The AASM wants you to do their inter-score reliability program, right? So why do they want you to do that? So that they can have data. So it's not for your benefit, it's so that they can have data. And they use that data, and they work with companies using that data. And so when you compare any of these three technologies to the average interscore reliability from all of the techs who are out there in the world, guess what? They're all three just as good as you all are at agreeing on anything. Does that surprise you? So, a lot of people go, well, doesn't agree with me. I think it's wrong, you know. And I say that sometimes too. Why did it score that? I don't know why it scored that. But if you look at the data, and they have thousands and thousands of sleep techs who are scoring off of their systems. And I know that they're gold standard. I don't know who that person is. So I watch y'all on Facebook. Who scored this record this month? What was that? You know, and all these different epics. You see the same things that you see when you're questioning an automatic scoring program. But we need to understand these things are getting really good. They're getting really good at being just as agreeable as we are. But the difference is that if you run this analysis and then you run it again, it'll do exactly the same thing. Guess what happens if I score a study and then I rescore that study? I have a good agreement. I've done it before. It's usually like 95 to 97%, but still there's that 3 to 5% where I disagreed with myself on my second look, you know. So we vary, they don't vary. And so these programs are offering sleep data with limited channels of recording. AI makes this all possible. Anybody using these types of things for fitting masks now? It's AI. It's automated intelligence. So if we're screening with the stop bang or the no SAS, that is an AI algorithm that is helping you determine, are these patients sleepy or do they have OSA? For diagnostics, you have AI automated sleep scoring, type 3 and type 4 with just pulse oximetry, scoring non-REM and REM detection. So it's just estimating sleep states, not particularly sleep stages. And then on treatment, you have AI making adjustments to patients as they're wearing devices for oral appliances, auto titration, and then image-based CPAP mask fitting. All of that is AI. And so we're seeing it start to really take a foothold. So what is AI? I always like to use this example here. AI is like talking to someone who has never seen a cat and has never seen a croissant. And you tell them all of these different features of how to identify a cat versus how to identify a croissant. And through all of this information that you give it, it starts to develop its algorithm on this is a cat and this is a croissant. And then you go back and you start to add things so that as you show a picture and the computer says, that's a cat, you go, no, that's a croissant. And then you show another picture and the computer says, that's a croissant. You go, no, that's a cat. And it starts to learn. So it not only has a data field that it's basing its analysis on, but it's looking at, is this a cat or is this a croissant? You know, and did you ever realize cats and croissants look that much alike? So that's what AI does. When things are very close, it can tell the difference. And coaching and coaching and coaching it helps out there. Now there are a couple of different bases of the AI stuff. Some are putting AI out in the field that's continuously learning from you. So if you have good scores, it's learning. If you have bad scores, it's learning. So we have to be careful on some of those platforms. Other manufacturers, and this is our particular approach, is that we have a lot of researchers that we deal with, so we got a lot of data in, and we take that data and say, this is this, this is this, this is this, and the algorithm learns. And when we get it to a point where we like that agreement, then we lock it, and we put it into our consumer product, locked. So it doesn't learn anymore from the user, it still continues to learn on the other side, and when we do a software update, we'll put it out. So there are different approaches from every company out there. You'll want to ask them how they're doing it. Because it can get better and better and better over time, or it could get worse and worse and worse over time, depending on how it is set up. But this is basically how it works. But AI scoring with high accuracy equals efficiency. What would you do if you didn't have to score 8 records a day? There we go, from the ACHC herself. So focus on accredit. There's lots of stuff. I mean, when I was working, we had an 8-bed lab in the clinical environment. I'm still working, but yeah. So when I was working in the clinical environment, we had an 8-bed lab, and even though I was the manager, we had limited staff like everybody does, and we didn't really score on the fly. I tried it at different times and all that, but we stuck mainly to analysis after the fact, and so I still had to score 4 studies a day. That ate up 3 to 4 hours a day, depending on the record, sometimes even longer. And so half your day is gone, and you're the manager of a program, and then you've got every other committee in the hospital you've got to sit on. Robert, you know all about that, you know, all the hours that you have to spend doing these things. If we can get good at this, it equals efficiency, and then it also gives us more information. So, like I said, INSO data, they also have a product called INSO Sleep, and this is particularly the one that Cadwell has in their PSG system, so that it's higher than the INSO TST. INSO TST is the one that's based on the pulse oximeter, and INSO Sleep looks at the actual sleep waveforms and scores a sleep study. Knox Medical, we are going into our 3rd generation of AI automated scoring. And it's all based on an integrated neural network analysis that our research side has developed. There's a company out of Australia called Full Power Technologies that have something called Sleep Tracker. It's another AI-based scoring program, but they are available in the United States as well. And the AASM has even seen this, and they have an artificial intelligence panel. And Dr. Iachimescu at the Atlanta VA is one of the chairs of that panel. But, and Dr. Berry is involved in this down at the University of Florida. I think he's just recently retired, though. But they even have a sleep medicine position statement on artificial intelligence in sleep medicine. Now, what else can it do for us? This is something that we're actually doing. We have in pilot in Germany currently a software that will take the data and then phenotype it on top of it. So what is the phenotype of sleep apnea according to the data? We can't do that if we're scoring a record on ourselves. You know, if we're manually scoring a record, we can't phenotype the patient. I mean, you can look at a muscle and you can see that this one's a little blue, this one's orange, these have stripes, this has more ridges, this one's smoother, that one's smoother. I mean, all these differences, they're all muscles. It's all sleep apnea, but what's really causing the sleep apnea and how do we get better at treating the sleep apnea? So that's what a phenotype is. It's a set of observable characteristics from an individual resulting from the interaction of its genotype, and how do I treat this particular sleep apnea patient. Here are the 4 phenotypes that were Harvard established in their particular study of this. That many are due to a narrow or crowded collapsible upper airway. Some are due to poor muscle responsiveness. Some are due to high loop gain. They have some cardiac factor that's involved there. And others have low arousal thresholds, so that it takes them longer to arouse from events than others do. And they did this by a particular analysis that they're using. And anybody's heard of the Python system? Anyway, Python is an analysis software that a lot of researchers use to break down particular aspects of things, and it's all this numerical data and everything. Well, if you export anything in theirs, it's called pup. A Python file is .pup. And And so they added to that with the respiratory analysis and called this the PUPI method. And so by analyzing the efforts, once you download one of these studies, it not only tells you here's their AHI, but it also tells you here's their phenotype. They've got poor muscle responsiveness. Might they do better on Inspire versus something else with CPAP? And all of this other information. Can that change the face of sleep medicine? Sure it can. Right now you got to fail CPAP before you can qualify for Inspire. What if we can tell you up front, it's muscle responsiveness that's the problem. We can stimulate muscle with Inspire. Can we treat these patients better than we're treating them now with more information? This is coming, and it's due to AI. Further along the road, and maybe even sooner due to COVID-19, this might get some people stirred up. Type 3 HSAT in children. Ooh. What do the labs say? Don't take my peds away. How many do peds anyway? Some. If you look nationally at the access to sleep medicine for pediatrics, particularly the very young kids, it's poor. You will wait months in Atlanta area to get into Children's Hospital. Months. Access is terrible because the labs are jammed, because you can't do an HSAT on a kid. But this is some information that was presented at SLEEP this past year that came out of CHOP, Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania. 38 patients did type 3 HSAT followed by in-lab PSG. Guess what? It's accurate. It worked well for kids. If we look more at accuracy, OSA was miscategorized in 23%, but when they removed EEG, EOG, and EMG signals, it was miscategorized in 23%, and mainly the inability to distinguish between sleep-wake and score events that included arousals was the difference. So, and none of the systems score the arousals when it comes to that. So it's currently not recommended in children. This is not any surprise. This is the position paper. But here's their primary reason for saying it's not recommended in children. There is little evidence comparing HSAT to PSG. Only 9 of 457 children. So there's just not much data. So now they're starting to look at type 2 because the primary issue with kids was lack of EEG. And this is a number of studies evaluating the feasibility and preference of, this is our device, the NOX-A1 type 2 ambulatory device. And then also baseline predictors. This is from Oldama. This is a feasibility study, and then a home level 2 polysomnography is feasible in children with suspected sleep apnea. And this one, there was another corporate sponsor of that. I forget who it was. I apologize. But if we look at the numbers here, type 2 versus 3 for pediatrics, and you look at the wait times that are going up and up and up, the access is just unavailable in many places at all. But, and then the limitations of it. The in-lab testing is expensive. Parents are having to travel sometimes from all over states to get to a children's hospital that actually does the children that are their kids' age and that sort of thing. A lot of times they're very high co-pays. Then they've got to pay for a hotel. They've got to pay for the travel. They've got to do all this stuff just to try and get their kid tested. It's very inconvenient. It's also very stressful, especially for little kids. And if you've ever hooked up a little kid, you know what I'm talking about. So on to this feasibility here a little bit more, and I'm having to run here a little toward the end. But somnogram quality. The ones that had a satisfactory signal for greater than 95% of the recording were really pretty good. EEG channels, 93%. EOGs, 92. Chins, right around 90%. EMG limbs for 91, 90. Guess what was the problem? Pulse oximetry and airflow. What's the problem in type 3 studies with your adults? Pulse oximetry and your airflow. It's not the EEG. Everybody's freaked out. Oh, you can't do full EEG at home. Guess what? It's better than type 3 is with your SATs. So this was on 201 school-age children who underwent that. Technically adequate on the first try in 91% of cases. What's your failure rate on a type 3 for an adult? I've seen them 30% sometimes. This is 9% on a kid at home. Pretty good. And this information, like I say, is coming out of CHOP in particular and was presented at SLEEP this year. The comparative effectiveness was good. And the advantages that you can identify sleep. This is a home sleep study here. How's that look? Looks like it's done in a sleep lab, doesn't it? So, advantage of it, it can identify microarousals. You're looking at the same information. And then also a study that was done with Down syndromes from CHOP. So, type 2, is it feasible? And everyone asked about that. I wanted to bring this and put it up besides just on a slide. This is a full PSG. Full PSG system, AASM compliant, frontal, central, occipital, your efforts, limbs, chins, everything. And if you're like me, I started in sleep in 1986. Guess what size my machine was? I was running on paper. And my stack of paper was bigger than this thing, you know. And if we started out earlier in the computer age with the sampling rates of things, and we still see sampling rate as an issue, and you look at some of the better sleep systems on the market, Alice samples at 2,000 samples per second and then compresses down. Cadwell samples at like 10,000, I think, and compresses down for storage. Guess what this does? 512,000 samples per second, and then compresses it down for storage to give you a higher. The technology now is ridiculous. And I'm not saying this is better than anything else. I'm just saying there's a lot more technology now than we've ever had before. So feasibility, it's feasible. Tolerability, families preferred it. The diagnostic accuracy, 91% acceptable studies. In this study, 34 Down syndrome kids were tested. They were around 12 to 18 years old. Their AHIs are on average were 14.2, total sleep time 6.3 hours. Here's what they said about it. It took less than 15 minutes to set up at home. It was easy to place the hand oximeter. It was easy to set up everything. They were able to replace it. Test seems usable. Test seems easy to use. Their experience was very good in 87% of the cases. Which one did they prefer? Home sleep test or in-lab test? Which test was easier for the child? Home sleep test or in-lab test? Which test was easier for the parents? Home sleep test or in-lab test? Accessibility to medicine, things moving toward the home while still maintaining quality. And if you looked at their sleep time, they were very similar. You actually had more sleep time in the home than you did in the lab with all of these kids. And here's some more information on that. So sensitivity, 76.9%. Specificity is 88.9%. Now sensitivity usually is higher than specificity. So sensitivity is saying, yes, you got it. Specificity is where you can say, no, you don't got it. You know, and it's like, and most tests, like your COVID test, COVID tests are set up to be more sensitive. So you're going to have more false positives than you had false negatives. This is going to show you that the numbers are pretty good, that you're going to have fewer false positives and maybe a few more false negatives. So, and then finally this that I wanted to throw out. Who's seen this lately? The future of OSA treatment with a pill. It's a combination of oxybutynin and atomoxazine, and they work on the different norepinephrine receptors and some other things to stimulate upper airway muscle tone. And these guys are not the only ones working on it. There's a lot of pharmaceutical companies that are working on having a pill for sleep apnea. And it's not just a stimulant. What were the results of this one? 30% reduction in OSA. For your milder patients who can't tolerate, again, we go back to the phenotyping of sleep apnea. Could a medication be a proper treatment? More data, more data, more data. So finally, my big question, why is there so much innovation? I really like to ask the question, why is there so much worry around the sleep lab? Because look at this chart. This is estimation of the global, if I can speak, I'm sorry, I'm first thing this morning and my coffee hadn't kicked in. Global prevalence and burden of obstructive sleep apnea, a literature-based analysis. If you look at the U.S., these are estimations for 936 million adults aged 30 to 69 years. And then the ones who have an AHI greater than 15, 425 million adults aged 30 to 69 years. So it doesn't even include the kids in these. How many of these patients have we treated? The best numbers show that we've only touched maybe 30% at best. Other studies show only 10%. So, but the best study out there, the most optimistic study, shows we've only hit 30% of these. Why are we worried about the future of a sleep lab? We've got a lot of new technology. We've got a lot of new technology that can expand our reach. If you are a sleep professional, what's your wish for these people? Find them and treat them. Find them and treat them. There's a lot of technology. I know I've kind of thrown it all out in a very scattershot method this morning, but there is a lot of new technology. Home sleep testing has come a long way. Many of the first assumptions about home sleep testing have proven not to be true. And like I said, matter of fact, the people who did not embrace home sleep testing are the ones who failed rather than ones who did embrace home sleep testing. But I'll absolutely tell you there's an even brighter future. We are getting more data. The phenotyping thing, I'm a geek. The phenotyping thing has me just twitching, you know. I can't wait till we can get some of that stuff. So you get an AHI, and then you get this phenotype of how can I treat this patient better. I mean, that's going to be monstrous when we can put that on a practical level and not just do it in a very controlled research trial. There's a lot of exciting data for the future of sleep medicine, and I think that future is bright. This is the main reason we haven't scratched the surface when it comes to reaching these patients. And so we need every tool we can get. AI, machine learning, phenotyping, all of those things, I think, are included. Thank you all very much for having me, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? All right.
With all this new transition of phenotype and all this, the PAP therapy seems to be consistent in true sleep apnea in addition to this field.
Yes. Yep, PAP therapy is still probably the preferred. I mean, it's the tried and true. Now, our current supply situation on PAP therapy, I think, has driven more of this idea for change. I see a lot more people considering oral appliance therapies. I see a lot more people considering surgical interventions. I see a lot more people considering other aspects because they're trying to get their patients treated in a very difficult supply environment. I mean, regardless of the Philips situation, we've got chip shortages, we've got resin shortages where you can't even make the shell for the machines. You've got all sorts of things going on in that supply market. And those sorts of things, I think, are pushing this change a little bit faster. But yeah, CPAP is still, and is going to be for a long time, I think, the number one therapy. But there are going to be other options as well.
For a bit.
For a bit.
It's not a new concept.
Right.
How closer to really adopting that into our plan of care from what you see? And I know Europe sometimes moves faster than the US.
Yep. We have it in pilot currently in Germany with a cloud product that when you download a type 3 or a type 2 study, it not only gives you the AHI but the phenotype. And I've seen it, and I've been on the development team, and it's there, and it's on the verge of being more widely available. I'm sure that we are not the only ones. That just doesn't happen. Everybody's working on this stuff. I don't know how close any others are to it, but I'm absolutely positive that we're not the only ones working on it.
So you think there'll be better adoption and more appropriate treatment pathway?
Absolutely. So the key is making it accessible. And that's been the challenge, you know, that you had to have basically a monstrous computer analysis program in order to try and even get this data. But being able to take that and build it into a product has been the big challenge. But once that is accessible, I think that that the community will embrace it immediately because it's so valuable. Yep. Yep.
Thank you.